Whether we're talking about value or growth investing, there's a couple of ETFs that completely dominate the space. Names like VYM, SPYG. These are broad market index funds that have low expenses and proven track records over long periods of time. And that's why in my portfolio, SCHD and SCHG are the core of my setup. They're just extremely high quality, index based, low expense ratios, everything you ever wanted in an ETF. And if I wanted to, I could stop here and just have these two ETFs make up my entire investing portfolio. But I like the idea of augmenting or complementing these funds with at least one more ETF. And the key thing here is I want the second ETF to have a slightly different approach than my main broad market fund, just in case for whatever reason this doesn't perform well in the future. For my second growth fund, it really doesn't make any sense to add VUG because they're so similar. So that's why in this video I want to talk about some great alternative ETFs that could be great pairs with these very popular, cheap broad market indexes we're all familiar with. And I'm going to begin this list with ticker KNG. And this is a Dividend Aristocrats ETF. And the Dividend Aristocrats are a subgroup of the S&P 500 that have increased their dividend payments each year for at least 25 consecutive years. And generally speaking, Dividend Aristocrats tend to be more established, cash flow rich companies. So during down years, they tend to go down less than the market. And overall, they do have competitive performance with the S&P 500. The only thing I don't like about Dividend Aristocrats is the overall yield isn't that impressive, 1.92%. But KNG is able to pull in nearly a 5% dividend yield by implementing a partial covered call strategy on the Dividend Aristocrats. So coming to the fund literature, we can see that this index is composed of two parts. One is an equal weighted portfolio of stocks contained in the S&P 500 Dividend Aristocrats index, and two, a rolling series of short call options on each of the Aristocrat stocks. And we can see right here that the percent overwritten is only 28%. So due to these factors, I think KNG is a great addition to one of these broad market ETFs on the value side. It's a bit more focused of a strategy, and we have that unique partial covered call strategy. Now KNG is produced by First Trust, and I was going through their other offerings, and I came across a very intriguing brand new ETF, ticker FCFY. And this is the S&P 500 Diversified Free Cash Flow ETF. And the free cash flow is essentially a measure of the profitability of a company. So it's a rather important metric. And because of that, this is not the first ETF to ever use this as a methodology input. Another name here is ticker COWZ. And they take in this case, the Russell 1000 index, and they filter it by free cash flow yield. They also have a version focusing on cash flow and growth, so trying to get the best of both worlds, profitable, high growth companies. Ticker VFlow is another ETF trying to do the same exact thing, filtering by cash flow and growth. However, in my opinion, there's a big gaping hole with the methodology of these cash flow focused ETFs. So if we take a look at the holdings of VFlow in this example, they tend to be super overweight in energy and healthcare. If we look at COWZ, this is even worse. 37% is in the energy sector. So in theory, these ETFs had a great idea, but in practice, they live and die by the health of the oil sector. But that's why I'm excited about ticker FCFY. This tries to address that gaping flaw. So this fund pulls companies from the S&P 500 index, ranked based on their free cash flow yield. The big difference, however, is the index sector weights mirror the sector weights of the S&P 500 index. So if we take a look at the sector allocation, it should mirror that of the S&P 500. So 28% is in information technology, and within the sector, instead of being weighted by market cap, it's weighted by that free cash flow yield. Now this fund is the definition of brand new, so unfortunately we cannot evaluate its past performance. But strictly in terms of the methodology, what it's trying to do, I'm a big fan and I have high expectations for its future. And it might prove to be a great complement to one of these other diversified broad market funds. Another great alternative fund here is ticker MOAT by VanEck, and this is the Morningstar Wide Moat ETF. And this seeks to replicate as closely as possible before fees and expenses the price and yield performance of the Morningstar Wide Moat Focused Index. And a moat is essentially a sustainable competitive advantage, but taking a look at the actual index here, it is very in-depth. So economically, the company could have high switching costs for consumers, cost advantage, intangible assets, network effect. There's also a valuation component to this. So they look at things including revenue growth, profit margins, taxes, changes in working capital, capital spending, and that's just stage one. So it's certainly a well thought out methodology and differentiates itself from the usual broad market growth funds. And not to mention, at least up until now, this is one of the few indexes that has been able to best the S&P 500. So without a doubt, MOAT is one of the ETFs you might want to take a look at. And then the final ETF that takes a slightly different approach to investing is ticker DIVB by iShares. And the thing that makes this one special is that this seeks to track the investment results of an index composed of US stocks with a history of dividend payments and or share buybacks. If you recall, one of the main purposes of generating a lot of free cash flow is that management can use it to return capital to the investor, aka share buybacks, dividends, and this ETF is essentially trying to work backwards and assuming that companies that do these activities, dividends, share buybacks, have a lot of free cash flow. In the top 10 holdings, we have Broadcom, Cisco, Exxon, IBM, P&G, Home Depot, Qualcomm, Texas Instruments, Johnson & Johnson, and Lowe's. All very established companies that have a lot of cash. So to put this all together, I think these very popular broad market funds found both in value and the growth side of the market are fantastic. I personally invest in both SCHD and SCHG. However, broad market indexes aren't the only option you have, and you might want to complement these holdings with something that's more focused. So for example, if you have VYM, you invest in lots of dividend paying companies, but you might want to add KNG to give you exposure to the elite dividend class of aristocrats. And the same thing applies to growth holdings. I think MOAT could be a great addition to something like SPYG. But not financial advice. Always do your own research and see what's best for you. If you guys enjoyed, leave a like before you go, and I'll see you guys in the next one.